To say that the relationship between risk and reward should be maintained sounds like a platitude when you're talking about game design. Yet on many occasions, Stephen Sharif, the creative director of Ashes of Creation, has said this, most recently in a response to Lazy Peon's question about RMT, real money transactions. But I think that the relationship between risk and reward may not be quite as simple as most people think, particularly in the case of Ashes of Creation. So let's begin by defining what I mean by the relationship between risk and reward. It's not the same, though it's similar to something like difficulty and reward. But let's think about something like Tetris. If I crank up the starting difficulty to, let's say, level 9 versus level 1, I've increased the difficulty. I might get a higher score depending on my version of Tetris, and I'm going to get a better sense of accomplishment because I might get to level 12 or 14, and there's not really any risk there. So I'm getting more reward for conquering a higher difficulty, but I am not actually going to risk anything. In fact, not even time is risked. If I started at level 1 and I tried to get all the way to level 14, if I lose at level 12, well, the risk is actually higher because my investment of time is actually higher. So risk actually involves loss. So this could be something as simple as time, or it could be resources of some kind. Really, almost always is going to boil down to time. Even if you were to lose money, well, you're losing time and effort that you use to make that money. So when we're talking about Ashes of Creation's risk versus reward, we're generally going to be talking about something that you might lose in order to gain more. It may not be as direct as full loot PvP or something to that effect, but it might just be, as I said, something that you might lose XP or you might lose time. I remember playing Might and Magic and going to Darkmoor or something like that, trying to get a treasure chest that I'm not supposed to get yet. And it was risky because I could die from it, but I wanted to get the loot that was inside because it would help me level up faster. Now, in that game, you could save scum and all these things, so it wasn't a very big risk, but imagine doing something like that in an MMO world where there is no save scumming. So if I'm pushing into dangerous territory, enemy territory, and I am trying to get a treasure chest or something to that effect, then I am potentially going to gain great loot from it, but I could lose either my time, my loot, durability, etc., etc. But the reason that risk and reward management is going to be absolutely crucial, and not just in the way that Stephen was alluding to in his response to Lazy Peon, where he believes that you shouldn't be able to buy your way into better loot and rewards. You've got to earn them. So that, in other words, when you see somebody that is powerful, it means that they have earned that power, and therefore preserving the relationship between really just reward. It's not even risk, but it could be time commitment. It could be effort and reward. Now, recently I've started playing New World sort of to catch up on what MMOs have been up to while I've been developing games. And the relationship between risk and reward and how that management is achieved is something that has really been driven home. And the relationship that I'm talking about here is the fact that I don't always want to risk and get rewarded. If Ashes of Creation cannot handle the feeling of, today I'm going to log in, I'm going to do a little bit of relaxing stuff. Yes, maybe a little danger will flare up here and there, but I'm mostly just playing this game as a PvE player would within a PvE world and achieving the things that are within those boundaries. For instance, like farming or just chopping some wood right outside the city walls. And there also has to be the capacity to say, let's go for it. We're going out to the borderlands. We're going to go invade the enemy territory, and we're going to go for bigger rewards. That balance, the management between those two states, is going to be crucial for retaining the population and maximizing the player count within Ashes of Creation, because that's really what's going to allow you to maintain that sort of very essential relationship between you and the game, this sort of habit that you build, like it's your comfortable game that you want to go into. It's not just this high stress environment that you're only going to want to do when you're feeling at your all. You got your energy drink, your gamer fuel, you're mainlining it, and you're going in fully sweaty. Sometimes you just want to relax in an MMO, particularly one that is so heavy on crafting and resource collecting, and Ashes of Creation has to permit for something like that. Now let's talk about how this could be achieved. Normally in an MMORPG, you've got these clear-cut distinctions between high-risk content, or rather high difficulty content, in the case that sometimes there is no risk, you're not actually risking anything more than time. And there is the chill content, the stuff that you're just doing with minimal to no difficulty or risk at all. This is usually going to be the distinction between a battleground, arenas, raids, and just your standard going out, mining, killing mobs, doing quests kind of content. Well, Ashes of Creation has it a little bit harder than that because of the fluid world design. They cannot set up these clear boundaries between those experiences and still remain true to their vision. So I'm going to describe how I think they might be able to achieve it. And of course, as with almost everything in Ashes of Creation, it's centered around the way that the node system, and in this case also the vassal system, is managed. So as we've learned, there are policies inside of nodes. These policies work a little bit like New World's territorial bonuses that you as the player can choose as you level up within a territory. In Ashes of Creation's case, the mayor selects it, it's voted on by the citizens, and then it is something that is going to be active in the node and its vassals. So that means it goes down the chain. So it would go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and you'd be able to get the policy rewards all the way down that chain. What this means is that the metropolis can have the most built up amenities. Perhaps there's the places that you have to conduct business, the best markets, guild halls, housing, all of these amenities that are actual buildings and constructions, but it is the lowest perhaps on resources. And it is also going to only have seemingly the policy that is specific to that city. So then the policies will actually trickle down through the chain. So that means that the level 5 node is getting the level 6's policies. The level 4 gets the 6, 5, and 4. Eventually, what that means is that the outer or less developed nodes, like the village, is getting the policy benefits of all of the chain, which means that perhaps that is where the most resource gathering, faction achieving, XP gains, whatever, could be. That pushes the player base out, so it's not all consolidated within one node. Everyone is just either in the capital or right outside because they want to get the best policies. But yet you have to go there for the amenities of the capital. So there's a gradation that basically will just follow down the chain and eventually will terminate in borderland territories. So in case you're not familiar, once there are nodes of the lowest level, they lock out other nodes, and this is to kind of create buffer states, right? So, or buffer land. And so now we have these two factions that are abutting against one another. So we have these two open, perhaps, territorial nodes that don't have anything in it. They're just like wildlands or borderlands. What's going to drive people to these nodes? And this is exactly where I think that with just a little bit of incentivizing, we can get something that's going to really benefit the risk-reward structure. So my idea would be that these nodes would be the highest in rare resources. Perhaps they have POIs, points of interest, treasure chests. Of course, caravans are going to go through here. So you're going to have a lot of potential gain here, raising the reward. The risk is that since you're next to an enemy, this is where you might be raided. This is where you might enter some PvP. Now, to further buff this up, because maybe it's still not going to be enough, I'm going to think, well, yeah, maybe there's a little bit more ore in that node, but I'm just going to chill in the village node further away from the buffer state. I'll mine a tiny bit less, but it'll be very safe. To push people out further, of course, when you're mining a node, and you've probably played a dozen of these games, where you're going to mine iron from the iron node and also like a gem or something like that. So what I would suggest is perhaps having an increase in the rare resources that are mined from nodes. Also possibly the node's density would increase as well. And that this would be something clearly displayed. I'm talking in a tactical map. So I can open the map and I can see immediately what are the hot spots for resources and conflict, because the way that the bonuses to the rare resources would be increased would actually be due to PvP combat. If there's more conflict in the area, the amount of rare resources increase. So if we raid, let's say that you get a 20 friends or 20 guildmates together, if you don't have that many friends, and you raid into the opponent's territory, now you've increased the rare resources in that territory temporarily. This would be something that would be exhausted to not get like permanent hotspots to develop. But now, of course, the opponent is going to see this. They're going to open up their tactical map and go, whoa, there's a 20% rare increase in this area. So I'm going to go over there. Of course, that means there's conflict. There's enemies there. We're going to get some people together, mount a posse and go get those resources. So now you've created this organic shifting hotspot where you're going to see open world PvP. You've got a lot of incentive for being here because that's where you're going to get the key ingredients to make the best stuff. So having the Borderlands be something where they're basically self-incentivizing battlegrounds that are very open and flexible, I think would be a good fit for this game. But it still hinges on one very important factor, which is to say I need to be able to feel comfortable mining right outside of my city walls or chopping down wood or something. And in order for this to be the case, you are going to need a few systems. And yes, I know that there's corruption, but I want to suggest, and they may already be thinking about this, I want to suggest that there be sort of territorial restricted corruption. So what I mean by that is that within a space, you might have a standing, right? So this is, again, something that New World does have, but it doesn't work this way. In New World, the way it works is that you can gain territorial experience. And as you gain territorial experience, well, you're going to be able to unlock bonuses that you select independently. Each player gets to select them. But that's not the way it's going to work in Ashes of Creation. As far as I know, it's going to be selected, like I said, by mayors and then an election process. So maybe you're just gaining access to these things or whatever other incentives you want to give it. But the point being that you're still have some kind of standing within the territory. The reason this is essential is because if I want to be a citizen or an ally of this area, I want there to be some kind of indication. Perhaps it would be something that could be left to be organic in essence. But I think here we're going to need a system with some kind of indication to be able to say, this is a person who's from this city. They have a good standing in this city. If I go outside of the city walls and murder in cold blood just because they were, carrying some logs and I didn't feel like chopping down the trees myself and I just wanted to get their logs, make it a little quicker for me, and then go and turn in the logs, maybe the city still benefits from those logs. Can't really stop that from happening, but I should now be known as a murderer within this place, as you would, right? It wouldn't just be something that, oh, well, I guess that's doesn't really matter. We just got the logs anyway, so cool. Like that guy is a non-consensual log transport assistant, so you'd be known as that, of course, in the chats and everything. But if the system would just be such that you would lose massive amounts of territorial standing, which again, you may not care about if you're in an enemy's territory, but if you're in your own town, you don't want to lose that standing. It also makes for a really nice and interesting new person in town. The stranger rolls in from the wastes. Are they going to be friend or foe? Well, they're coming in gray or at 50 or whatever the normal standing is. And you don't trust them because they might be here to kill you, but they're not necessarily an enemy. If a guy rolls in full red, he's not just corrupted, but he's an enemy of you. And sometimes that'll be clear enough through other means, but perhaps in the case of something like a person murdering, ganking people out in the wild, you might need a little bit of a system here. And I think that any kind of disincentivizing of ally to ally, and again, this is a loose term because there are no factions in Ashes of Creation, which is wonderful. I really appreciate that. But you still need to have an organic faction. And this is how you can do it. You can do it through a node-based or territorial-based, because again, they're these sort of country structures. So it may be that you have a faction within this country, and that faction there, of course, is something that you want to preserve if you want to be a citizen of that faction. In essence, all of this adds up to something pretty simple. I log in, I feel I'm tired, I just have 15 minutes, something like that. I'm just going to go out, gather a few resources, deposit them, do a couple of actions that could almost be considered something like a daily quest, but not a daily quest, that I'm just doing in order to benefit my faction. Low risk, low reward. Versus some days I'm going to come in and I'm feeling zesty. I want to go for that reward. I'm going high risk. I'm going to venture into those territories. And those territories need to be something that are both intelligible to the player, again, through maybe a tactical map that just has highlights of where the hotspots are and what the percentages of increases are, and knowing that there's conflict there. So if I'm going into that zone, the reason that that rare increase is happening is because there's conflict there. And I'm not talking about war. I'm talking about that there may be some player-to-player conflict. It's more like skirmishing. So that's my concept for a way that they can quickly, of course, this isn't going to be the only risk-reward structure. There's going to be a lot of other classic risk-reward structures like fighting big bosses, if there's going to be higher difficulty dungeons and raids and things like that. But this would be a very nice way to have that sort of 30-minute to 1 hour, maybe 2-hour window sort of player be able to kind of gradate how much risk to reward they want. Just move away from your territory for more risk, more reward, and move back into your territory for less risk, but less reward perhaps, unless of course you're doing some crafting or something like that, in which case you might be either in the capital itself or out in your freehold somewhere safe. So let me know what you think about this sort of risk reward structure. What do you think? Is it possible to have a kind of casual experience even within a PvP world if the right systems are in place? The idea is to make it feel like you know who you should be worried about for the most part, but your ally or your friend, if you're being a jerk, if you're running up to everything that they're trying to mine and mining it without really having any manners or something, maybe they're going to attack you. It's just a fun feeling. I think that kind of tiny bit of tension and realism adds a lot of interest and spice to the world. But if you're minding your own business, if you're just being a nice civil person, there shouldn't be that much to worry about. And if you were to be attacked, then you would know that this person is basically declaring themselves an outlaw. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if you want to hear more Ashes of Creation content. I talk about other MMOs and indie games, and I will see you next time.